I think that this is going to be a big electoral liability for the ANC, and it's going to be perhaps hastening their decline below that 50% majority threshold.
In the following two clips, David, Ansara, and I unpack South Africa's energy crisis. We try to figure out why there is a seeming lack of political will to solve South Africa's rolling blackouts, as well as figuring out whether a state of emergency is really the best way to solve the ails that afflict South Africa's energy landscape. We hope you enjoy.
What we don't want to see is, for example, emergency powers used to restrict access to power on, for example, for public benefit purposes or in the public interest. We saw how ham-fisted the COVID pandemic response was in terms of the states of disaster and so on. And so we don't want we want fewer restrictions on people's ability to generate electricity rather than more government control and government mandates. So I think I would be encouraged to see the president lifting the cap entirely, for example, in his so-called family meeting. But, I think we need to see a relinquishing of control rather than a tightening of the grip on South Africa's economy.
Yeah, I think we can highlight that motif maybe in other areas as well, just in terms of our analysis. For example, we're seeing it now with the possible introduction of the Employment Equity Amendment Bill, where government unfortunately seems to double down on policies which have produced negative effects, but which won't solve the current issue. So we see this with maybe a government becoming more desperate. They're going to pursue measures which on the surface they think are useful now, for example, emergency in terms of state of emergency, but which won't actually bring about the right changes to solve the electricity crisis, for example.
That period in the mid-2000s when growth was in excess of 5%, was a huge electoral dividend for the ruling ANC. The Thabo Mbeki presidency, the second presidency, that was off the back of 69.69% electoral victory, which is really the high point of the ANC's electoral power. And as economic growth declines, so too does the electoral fortunes of the party. And I think also perhaps if you're an individual and you're living your life and maybe economic growth is starting to subside, it's maybe a bit of an abstract idea. You maybe see it in terms of your spending power or what have you. But when the lights are going out every 4 hours in your home, it's a very potent reminder of the failures of governance. And I think voters might remember that when they go to the ballot box. And I think a big electoral headwind for the ANC. The other headwind is the aging support base that they have, an increasingly urbanized electorate, which tends to focus more on opposition parties. And I think that's perhaps good for a broader discussion on electoral politics that we can have with our clients. But I think that this is going to be a big electoral liability for the ANC, and it's going to be perhaps hastening their decline below that 50% majority threshold.
Yeah, that point about how when the power goes out for hours, that's a very potent reminder of the consequences of the wrong policies. I was recently visiting in the United States, and I tried to explain the phenomenon to Americans and people from around the world at the conference at which I attended, and just how one takes for granted things such as consistent, relatively cheap electricity supply, economic growth, jobs, that sort of thing. But when you don't have the right basic ingredients in place, the consequences are going to follow from that. Do you think the reality of South Africans on the ground might drive home the need for actual reform to happen, or do you think there's such a serious disconnect, maybe still, with those in power that it's simply going to get worse up until breaking point? Thank you very much for watching. If you would like access to the full recording, we invite you to become a member of our YouTube channel, or alternatively, you can go to the link in the description below and sign up for our 30-day free trial and have access to the full recording as well as previous recordings from the CRA. Until next time, this is Chris Hattingh for the Centre for Risk Analysis. Take care.